Hey guys, today I want to talk about Medicare, whether we should have Medicare or not in the Philippines. You know, a lot of guys are contemplating keeping their Medicare back in the US so that they can go back to it if God forbid something happens, they can go back there and use it. But here's the problem. A lot of times when we have something like a heart attack or a stroke, or we find out something really bad has happened to us health-wise, we cannot get on an airplane to just up and travel away and just go back home. And when you get back home, I notice that there's a lot of guys that do go back home, and when they do go back home, their doctor is no longer available because they've been away from that doctor for so long or whatever, and they have to find another primary care physician back there, and that takes time. So you want to be set up in the Philippines. One of the guys right now that's having that problem is Philly in the Philippines. I was watching one of his videos the other day because somebody had told me about it, and I had heard about this off several other people that went back home, and they found out that their primary care physician was starting to have people that were away for 2 years or more. They were just getting rid of them. They would like you weren't no longer, you had to sign up again, and they weren't taking new patients at that time. So this is happening quite a lot because I've heard this, like I said, from many other people before. People have written to me saying, hey, Steve, warn the guys, tell people this. Things in the United States are starting to change. Now let's get to the Medicare part. Okay, Medicare costs about $170, give or take a few bucks. I believe this year was the first year it actually went down. I think it went down like $5 because of some dementia medications or something like that. But anyway, here's the problem. Over here, you can get some pretty good coverage, and you got to buy coverage over here anyway, unless you're self-covered and you have a lot of money in the bank or something like that. For the average Joe over here, should probably be paying about, if you're my age, 60 years old, for basic needs, probably about $1,000 a year for insurance. Now, if you want to get more comprehensive, you're probably going to pay anywhere from $200 to $400 a month or somewhere in there for your insurance. That's what you're going to pay, for more comprehensive insurance, depending on what you have. And there's lower price ones. You can get ones where there's deductibles, which help you sometimes. If you have the money in the bank, sometimes that deductible can lower your rates quite a lot, actually. And remember, this is just for inpatient care. Just inpatient, not outpatient. So that would be out of pocket. So you want to have like a really, really good insurance and make sure you're covered really well. Now Pacific Cross, we've talked about that. They have Cigna. They have many, many different plans. You can go to, as I tell you guys before, go to Pacific Prime online, and they'll find an insurance company that will fit your needs. Okay? Now, I could be off a little bit on these prices, obviously, because there's a lot of different companies out there, and it depends on the deductibles and stuff. But you want to look at these plans, and you also want to be covered in the Philippines and make sure that they will pay the hospital directly. You want to ask Pacific Prime these questions when you're talking to Pacific Prime, and they'll give you the answers, because some of these companies will not pay directly, and that means, guess what? You can't leave the hospital. And here's the other problem. For you guys that are contemplating going back and forth, and you said, well, I can have Medicare is good over here for 6 months. This is what somebody had told me. And they said, well, I can have it over here. Well, they're not going to pay the hospital directly. So you got to pay for out of pocket. Okay, so that's going to kill you guys, like if it's $50,000 or $60,000, and some of you guys don't have it, and guess what? They're going to tell you can't leave the hospital. And I've said this before, and I've had a couple of people say, no, Steve, that's not true. It's illegal in the Philippines. Well, we got a guy in town here right now who is actually being held in town here. He's from Tracy Martirez. I believe he's over in General Trias right now, but he's being held until he comes up with the money to pay his bill. So, what does that say? It's true. It does happen. And we've heard this off many, many people over here, and it happens quite often. So be really careful, and don't listen to these guys that tell you that it doesn't happen, because it does. It does. Because they tried doing it to me before, too. They said I could not go to the ATM to get the money to pay my bill. They said, yeah, I couldn't leave the hospital. And then my girlfriend, she had some money on her to pay the bill. It wasn't a huge bill per se, but they wouldn't even let me go to an ATM. So that, Don't believe everything you hear off people, because sometimes it's just a bunch of bunk. I see these guys writing in the comments section, Steve, you don't know what you're talking about. They can't hold you. They cannot hold you legally, but they do, okay? They do. So trust me on that. And guys, when you're doing the Medicare thing, really think that out, whether you want to keep it in the United States, because you're really kind of throwing $170 a month away. You're throwing it away, because in an emergency, a lot of you guys are planning on jumping on a plane and flying home. You're not going to be fit to fly home. You need the money. You need the money to have an emergency fund so you can pay up some of that bill, and also you need some sort of insurance company. You need the emergency fund for things that are not covered, and you need the insurance money for things that are covered. And you want to make sure you get really good coverage. Right now, I have about $30,000 worth of coverage. Eventually, probably in the next year or two, I'm going to go more comprehensive, because I'm getting older. I'm more likely to get sick. I'm more likely to get a heart attack or a stroke or cancer. God willing, I can keep my health up fairly decent. But, you know, guys, be really careful. Be careful what you do. Be careful about holding on to that Medicare because you think that you're going to be able to go home. You're not going to be able to go back home. So, guys, be sure that you really think these things out, guys. Be sure that you write down what your plans are as far as medical, because you need to have a plan. And you know, you don't have to follow what I tell you, but make sure you have some sort of comprehensive plan to make sure that you're going to make it to fruition, whatever your sickness is, heart attack, stroke, cancer. Make sure that you can get that covered, either through self-coverage, you know, having a large emergency fund aside, or having a good comprehensive insurance plan, or a little bit of both, where you have like a lower priced Pacific Cross Select plan like I currently have now, and kind of self-insured too. That's another way of doing it. But a lot of these guys are planning, and they're not thinking when they do this. They say, well, I'm going to run to Guam, or I'm going to run to Hawaii. I'll run to California or whatever. I'll jump on a plane if I'm really sick. Are you really going to be able to jump on a plane if you're really sick? Probably not. So be careful, guys, what your plans are. Make sure you really think these things out. If you do want to do something like that, find a plan that'll ship you home, and make sure that you're covered in the U.S., because a lot of these expat plans will cover you almost everywhere in the world, except for, guess where? The United States, and sometimes Canada, sometimes the UK. So you want to make sure that you're covered throughout the world. Okay. Now, if you want to save money, then make sure you get just a regular expat plan where you're not covered in the United States, but you're covered here. At least then you can walk into St. Luke's and you're going to have full coverage or whatever. You really need to think this stuff out. But for me, I'm not going to get Medicare. I'm not going to sign up for Medicare. I'm going to make sure that I use that $170 wisely here in the Philippines, and make sure I have full coverage here. You can always sign up later if you want to go back to the States, if you decide to go back, but it will be a little bit more. God bless, guys. Take care. Hope you enjoyed today's show.